Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We just heard Kristen Larson talk about his new book on joy. And I wanted to reflect a little bit on what he said and on joy and give you some of my own thoughts, if I could, because I think it's a really deep conversation, well worth having. Joy is an interesting concept. And if you look it up in the dictionary, you'll find out that joy is actually a feeling of great pleasure and happiness. It's the combination of great pleasure and happiness. So it's obviously something more than just being happy. And I thought that's kind of interesting. And then the other thing about joy versus happiness is sort of an external influence on you that makes you happy. It's the pursuit of happiness. It's something that you strive for and you go looking for and you hopefully find. But joy is different. True joy is limitless, life-defining, a transformative reservoir waiting to be tapped into. It requires the utmost surrender, and like love, is a choice to be made. Joy is a choice that you make. It's internal. It's something that you decide, I want to be joyful. I want to have joy. Versus happiness, which is something you pursue and try to get. It's external. It comes to you. I think that's really interesting. And so therefore, when Kristen was talking about he wakes up and he chooses joy, he chooses to be joyful. I think that's really powerful. It's sort of like choosing to be optimistic. It's sort of like choosing to love. It's not something that actually happens. I think a lot of people think love happens. Lust might happen, but I don't think love happens. I think love, joy, optimism is something you choose, that you want to be and have as an attitude. I had someone describe this as having a line, and you got to look at life and experiences and instances and decide, are you below the line or above the line? Below the line being negativity, of being unhappy, depressed, sad. Above the line being optimistic, in love, happy, joyful, etc. And that you've got to be evaluating yourself on a fairly regular basis. Are you below the line or above the line? And trying to always stay above the line. I like that. And then I had someone else tell me a story about a guy in the war. And I thought about someone who was very close to me at one point in time through a prior relationship I had. And he was one of the most joyful person, positive people, resilient people I've ever met. He was sort of like a grandfather-in-law. And this gentleman was a farmer and got drafted into a division of an army during World War II. And he fought and got captured on like the third day of the Western Offensive in World War II. Spent 5 years as a prisoner of war because he in a German prisoner of war camp, because he had farming skills. He was farmed out to a farmer, and but he was wounded, and so he ended up getting gangrene and problems, and because he was working on a farm, he actually was, unlike a lot of other prisoners of war, actually got treated. When the war was over, he didn't know which way to go as the Allies approached, and he didn't know whether he'd be behind or in front of which enemy line. And by chance, he met someone that spoke his language and saved his life and took him back to where his wife and daughter were. I met this man later in life, and he always had the most positive attitude. He had people around him that weren't very positive, weren't very nice, were often negative. And yet he always had a positive attitude. He had a tough life. He lost his leg. He always had a positive attitude. He got a part-time job in his 80s just so that he could be doing stuff. He was incredibly resilient. He always had a positive attitude. He always had a smile on his face. He was always looking for something nice in the world, even though there was a lot of non-niceness around him. You all must know people like this and have met people like this and have had experiences like this, where there's some people that just, have got sun shining on them, and other people that have got rain shining on them. I don't think that is something that happens to them, because similar people in a similar circumstance can have very different attitudes. One being very negative and sour and always negative and complaining and problematic, versus others that are always positive, happy, optimistic, in love, etc. And that was this guy. It's a choice. Joy is a choice. Being above the line, always positive, is a choice. And I'm not suggesting you always have to be overly positive and Pollyannish, but being confident, being positive, being optimistic, being joyful, being gracious, I think those are all positive things. So how do you achieve it? A couple of suggestions, if you could. Number one, when you wake up, don't just grab the telephone right away. Give some thought to what you're happy about, what you're grateful for. One person I heard recommended, write down every day 3 things that you're grateful for. I think that's a good idea. I, often pray in the morning and in the evening, and just say thank you for those things that I'm grateful for. So whether you write it down or you just say it to yourself, or say it to whatever God or being you might potentially believe in, I think that's helpful to set your mind. I think set a intention for the day, an objective for the day. It doesn't have to be a to-do list of, this thing I'm going to do and that thing I'm going to do, but an intention of, I'm going to be happy. I'm going to achieve something. I'm going to do great things. I'm going to go for a great walk. I'm going to call my sister, whatever that objective, that intention might be. I think it's important to do. I think it's really important to get out into nature. People call it forest bathing or tree hugging, or, walking barefoot in the grass, whatever it is. I know my own attitude is different if I have spent all day in the house, in the car, in the office, versus those days when even maybe all it is going out for a 5-minute walk to grab a sandwich at lunch, or hopefully a walk around the neighborhood in the evening, or whatever, something down by the lake. For some reason, having some exposure to the outside, to the sun, to the night sky, whatever that is, to trees, to grass, to plants, to flowers, I think it'll change your attitude. I think reading and immersing yourself in someone else's life in a piece of fiction is really helpful. And I think it's more powerful than a movie or a TV show, because when you're reading, the description of what's going on in words is far more intense, descriptive, detailed than you would get in a movie or a TV series or something like that. And you have to imagine it in your mind, and you have to imagine what those characters are doing and what they're feeling and how they're interacting, because it's not just told to you. You've got the words, but you've got to imagine it in your head. I think that's how you get empathy. I think it's a great way to get empathy, other than maybe, living with and meeting those and having dinner with those different people, but living it through fiction, living with them through fiction, I think is really helpful. And then I think it's putting something, on a wall. I have the Believe poster on my wall from the Ted Lasso show. I used to have other sayings on the wall that were really quite meaningful to me. I think setting the intention long-term by way of a sign. Some people thought it was a brand statement for yourself that you put on a wall. Some people thought it's an affirmation or an aspiration or a dream that you put on the wall. But something like that sets your long-term objective, I think, is really helpful. Anyway, this weekend, can I give a suggestion? Choose joy and have a joyful weekend. Thanks for joining. That's my show for tonight. I remind you, I'm on every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960M. You can stream me online at www.saga960m.ca. Have a joyful weekend, everybody. Good night.